Hello and welcome everyone to the 8th session of the Schoolyard Forest Design Lecture Series. My name is Lauren McKenna. I'm with Green Schoolyards America, and supporting me today are my colleagues Allison Torres and Sarah Matsumoto, and you'll probably see some other Green Schoolyards folks here as well. So our agenda today will include some introduction and updates. We will have a presentation about schoolyard forests and stewardship of those spaces, followed by some Q&A time with our guest speakers. This series is a part of the National Schoolyard Forest System, whose goal is to increase tree canopy and shade students from extreme heat. I just want to highlight a just published resource that is going to be an important foundation for today's conversation: How to Care for Schoolyard Forests and Living Schoolyards, Part 1, Stewardship Principles and Best Practices. Of course, Rachel Pringle, who's here from Green Schoolyards America, will dive deep into this topic, but I just want to show you how you can find this resource. In the link, scroll to the bottom and you'll see the section Stewardship Principles and Best Practices, and you'll see a gray box, and it will link to Part 1 and Part 2. Part 2 is upcoming, and we'll hopefully have another webinar in the future to discuss that resource. If you missed our announcement last time, again, we're excited to share this interactive map of our findings of a 2-year study on the 10,000 plus public K-12 schools in California. The study shows tree canopy coverage in the areas where students spend time during the school day. We found that percentage was only about 6.4% tree canopy, and even less for many students. If you go to this link, you'll also see in the gray box a link to policy recommendations for increasing tree canopy for our most vulnerable students in California. I also hope that you'll all check out our written and video case study content. We hope to expand upon these case studies, and we encourage you to submit information about your own schoolyard forests, advocacy, or any local policies. We'd love to hear from you and see photos across the US and beyond. Related to today's topic, we also encourage you to tell us about what you're doing in your schoolyard forest related to stewardship, maintenance, and care of the trees at your schools. And thank you to all of you who have already submitted. Before we start today's lecture, a reminder that the series will run through 2024, the first Thursday of each month, 11 a.m. Pacific time. Our next lecture is Thursday, July 11th, and please note the date is the second Thursday to accommodate the July 4th holiday. Please invite your friends and colleagues to join next time. So on to today's lecture topic. Nurturing forests and healthy living green spaces at our school starts, of course, well before planting trees and extends well after. There needs to be some kind of plan and a mindset of care and stewardship so these living schoolyards thrive, and that's something that the whole school community can work on together. So in today's lecture, our guest speakers will discuss what's involved in managing and stewarding schoolyard forests for long-term health and resiliency, including stewardship principles, best practices, costs, key partners, stakeholders, and much more. To introduce our speakers, Rachel Pringle is Vice President at Green Schoolyards America. She's developed programs and organizations in the outdoor education and green schoolyard fields for over 20 years. Rachel's taught in and cared for a public school garden for several years and is co-author of How to Grow a School Garden, a complete guide for parents and teachers from Timber Press. She holds a BA and an MA in conservation biology from the University of Pennsylvania. Ayesha Ercelawn is the education specialist at Green Schoolyards America. She's taught and developed environmental education curriculum in green schoolyards for more than 20 years, bringing science, math, language arts, and social sciences outdoors. She has also trained teachers, She has a BA from Smith College and a master's in ecosystem science and management from Yale School of the Environment. And an ecosystem perspective continues to deeply inform her thinking today. And our other speaker, Steve Collins, is the facilities maintenance manager at Berkeley Unified School District. I do want to note that his team and district have been huge supporters of Green Schoolyards America's works. And there is written and video case studies about Berkeley Unified on our case study page. The background that I have behind me is Washington Elementary, which features a 50-year-old child planted forest that's still thriving and central to that school community today. That's in Berkeley. And we're grateful for all the work that they're doing in your school district, Steve. So I'll pass it on to Rachel, who will get us started.
Thank you, Lauren. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. As Lauren mentioned, today we're going to talk about stewardship and maintenance. And it's a deep topic that I know we could take several webinars to cover. So today, my goal is to provide some broad perspective and some frameworks for approaching the care of living green school grounds, including schoolyard forests. So let's start with some perspective. Next. This is the traditional school ground paradigm. This model is easy to maintain and therefore is the default design that we see in so many schools. It may not look exactly like this, but asphalt is what we're talking about. Once it's paved, it requires very little staff time to maintain. It has very few infrastructure needs, except for maybe some playground equipment upkeep on elementary yards. And it does not demand any real community or student engagement. Next. So to go from the model on the left to the model on the right can be a big shift for some schools. And to be fair, not all schools will need to make this drastic a change, but no matter what, going from asphalt to any size, living, green, nature-filled space requires a big change in our approach to its care. Next. This is a new and living school ground paradigm. This model requires more staff time, equipment, expertise, funding, and engagement. But in our current paradigm and system, not all schools have the knowledge, time, staffing, funding, or support needed to sustain the ongoing care of this type of schoolyard. And I think it's important to acknowledge this in order to see the issue fully and to begin to shift the paradigm to one that provides the knowledge, time, staffing, funding, and support that is needed. Next. There we go. So we're talking about to make a shift from the old paradigm to a new living paradigm requires school districts and those entities that support them, like boards of education, state departments of education, and the U.S. Department of Education, to think of themselves as land managers. In fact, school districts are often one of the largest land managers in every city, and that they think of themselves as land managers that can leverage this land to do more for students and the community, to leverage this land for the benefit of students and the community. Next. So there are many benefits of making this shift. There are many learning, health, and ecological benefits. We've outlined these in several of our other webinars. But to share quickly, schoolyard forests and living schoolyards provide hands-on curriculum opportunities and enhance academic performance. They promote physical and mental health by providing opportunities for physical activity and access to nature, which reduces stress and improves social and emotional wellness. They provide shade and reduce heat, strengthen wildlife corridors, infiltrate stormwater, improve air quality. Next. So how do we go from the paradigm that defaults to asphalt to one that defaults to green and living infrastructure? It starts, we believe, with a change in mindset. From one that views maintenance as a chore to one of stewardship, which emphasizes care, consideration, and relationship. And so we offer the following stewardship principles as a framework for this shift. Next. This is principle 1, and it's embrace nature. To support schoolyard forests in schools across the country requires a deeper understanding of and willingness to engage and even embrace, quote unquote, messy natural processes. In order to do this, districts and school communities can get to know local flora and fauna, let leaves dropped from trees go undisturbed, provide habitat for bees, and invite enough nature in such that there are observable cycles and real natural phenomena with which to engage students. Next. It's important to remember that the opportunity to engage in these processes is exactly why schoolyard forests and living schoolyards are so beneficial to student learning, well-being, campus beauty, school pride. They allow for countless experiences of discovery, observation, and connection to the natural world and each other. A schoolyard without living things and their cycles, leaves, soil, organisms, decay, regrowth, provides very few opportunities to foster a sense of place or curiosity about our shared world. Next. The next principle is expect change. The consistent and sustained stewardship of a schoolyard forest is
I'm glad I have
vital.
my earphones on.
Hmm.
La,
Is
la,
vital.
la, la, la. She's a tap dance. Oh, you did
Sorry,
it
is
too?
other people, there's somebody who's not on
Can
mute.
I ask someone from my staff to just double check the muting of our participants? Thank you. Sorry, Rachel. Continue.
Oops, I muted myself by accident. No worries, thank you. So it's this, so I'll just start from the beginning here for expect change. The consistent and sustained stewardship of a schoolyard forest is vital as the trees and other plants will grow, drop leaves and other materials, decay and change through the seasons and over the years. So plan for this. Likewise, a school's human community often changes too, with new students each year, teacher and administrative turnover, and families coming and going. Because change is constant in a schoolyard, it is very important to understand these yearly and seasonal and life cycle processes, and then incorporate them into a school and district level stewardship plan. Next. Principle 3. Here we go. Develop an ethic of care and connection. This principle encompasses that shift from maintenance as a chore to a mindset of stewardship. So stewardship is an ethic of understanding and care for a place and its resources. It involves consistent and sustained attention to a place, and consistently engaging students in stewardship, which we'll hear more about later, will create a culture of care at school. And this deeper engagement with a school's local environment helps students and the school community develop a sense of place, which is fundamental to fostering a connection to, an interest in caring for the broader world around us. And this ethic of care can be developed at the district level too. Next. So going back just briefly to the original question of how do we go from one school ground paradigm to the next, it also starts with a change in approach. And so we offer the following best practices to support schools and districts in ensuring the long-term sustainability of schoolyard forests and living schoolyards. Next. So best practice number 1, design with stewardship in mind. Schoolyard forest or living schoolyard should be designed with an understanding of what the long-term stewardship and management of the space might entail. Initial plans could consider what is already in place at the school or district level, if there is anything in place, to guide how a schoolyard is managed. School districts may have contracts, maintenance contracts or stewardship contracts, guidelines, and policies for who and what is involved in schoolyard maintenance, and these documents should be consulted during design. School site staff and students should be consulted to ensure their ideas for long-term stewardship are heard and incorporated. Easy access to water, appropriate tools, and durable storage for those tools are all critical to think about from the start. And ensure that materials and infrastructure are repairable by using standard-sized and mixed materials, such that down the road, others can easily address needs without having to find, specific things that were implemented long ago. Next. Number 2, establish partners in stewardship. Schoolyard forests require a team to manage and sustain them through the years. School communities and school districts both have roles and responsibilities in stewardship and management of schoolyard forests. is important that the relationships between all the district partners are nourished and supported. And to do this, it is important to understand the context in which each of these partners operates and the capacity they each can offer. So for example, many districts only have a handful of gardeners overseeing a disproportionate number of school sites and other facilities. Each gardener only has a few hours per week, maybe, at each campus, barring any sort of emergencies at other facilities. And it's often extremely challenging for these gardeners to manage anything on their assigned schoolyards beyond routine mowing, weed whacking, and the occasional pruning. Acknowledging these limitations and finding alternative solutions is really important. Often schoolyard forests elements are managed by other partners. In this diagram here, you can see the many other partners, and clear and consistent communications with district facilities or buildings and grounds, including district gardeners, is critical to building the goodwill and rapport. Next. Number 3, form a committee. Once partners have been identified, like we did previously, it's helpful to organize a group into a stewardship committee in support of the schoolyard forest. The group will ideally consist of representatives from some of the partners listed in the previous slide, such as families, teachers, the principal, and other community members. And the committee serves as the main driver and coordinator of living schoolyard efforts at the school site. Next. Number 4, draft a plan. Draft a stewardship plan. Schools and districts need to plan for the ongoing maintenance of schoolyard forests. Bringing school communities together around long-term stewardship requires an understanding of roles and responsibilities among team members, understanding who the team members are, and as well as clear processes and procedures that are communicated and practiced every year across the school and the district. The Schoolyard Forest Committee should coordinate the development of a yearly stewardship plan or update one if there already is one, and districts can hold a copy. Next. Number 5, keep records. So school communities inevitably face turnover and change, and it's therefore really important to be as organized as possible about your schoolyard forest history, stakeholders, routines, successes, and challenges. School sites should create and keep a digital binder, such as on a Google Drive or another cloud service that includes the following things: contacts, stewardship plans that have been drawn up yearly, contracts that go with that, sources of materials, where have we gotten things in the past, maps of the schoolyard and how things have changed, inventories of tools and plants, so we know when things have been purchased or where they are, what tools and things do we need every year, and the history of the project. And this binder can be handed on from one year to the next. Next. And so quickly, I want to take just a moment to talk about costs. And this could take an entire webinar in itself. But costs. The point here is that costs really need to be planned for, just like everything else. The big message here is that the ongoing stewardship of schoolyard forests needs to be planned for, and costs are part of that. So a schoolyard forest with as many as 25 trees will need expertise during planting, irrigation, installation, and periodic pruning in the first 5 years to establish the trees. But the costs and the tasks diminish, save for water cost, occasional pruning, and health checks over time. So this diagram illustrates how schoolyard forests, as an example of a living schoolyard, the stewardship needs decrease over time. But a forest's ability to provide shade increases. And as shade increases, the possibility of reducing cooling costs for adjacent buildings and health benefits for children also increase. So for a school garden, there may be, for example, more ongoing costs due to the nature of that type of schoolyard. But whatever elements are included in the site, plan for the costs of their upkeep, maintenance, and repair over time. Next. So we have some new resources on this topic. Part 1 is linked in the URL that's provided on this page, and as Lauren already shared. And we're also looking for case studies that showcase best practices and share stories of long-term stewardship success. So we would love to hear about your examples if you have them, and share. Lauren shared the link earlier. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Yeah, we'll share this again in the chat so you have it, and I will pass it off to Ayesha.
Great, thank you. Again, my name is Ayesha Ercelawn, and I am the education specialist at Green Schoolyards America. Glad to be here today. So what I want to talk about briefly is the wonderful possibilities of engaging the students in stewardship of their schoolyard forest or living schoolyard, and seeing them as capable even when they're really young. So I started with this photo of preschoolers moving mulch with their teacher, Barbara, all the way to the forest in the very back. It does take longer, but it is well worth it for a bunch of other reasons. Hopefully students will also have helped in the original planting of the schoolyard forest or living schoolyard. Let's see, I'm not forwarding successfully. There we go. But there's many ongoing tasks, as we can all imagine, and including the students in that has many benefits. Some of those are developing a stewardship ethic, which goes hand in hand with a sense of responsibility. Many schools have responsibility as one of the core values they talk about with students all the time. And this is a place where they can extend that idea of responsibility and developing a sense of pride in their school as well. Help students develop a sense of connection to nature, which we know has many benefits for mental health, and helps build teamwork skills. They get to participate in what they know is real work and feeling capable. They develop new skills that for older students can lead to career pathways. They get to apply academic skills to the real world, and I'll touch on some of those in a few minutes. It's an opportunity to be physically active, to collaborate across grades if these are work days or after school. And really importantly, it helps them feel empowered to admit that they are making a difference, especially when we need to provide them as much of a sense of hope as possible. And probably most importantly, they really have a lot of fun participating in this, whether it's during the school day or after school or summer school or special work days. So one of the most important tasks for taking care of anything is watering, of course. And realistically, an irrigation system is needed to keep things going, especially the first few years in the schoolyard forest. But finding ways for students to water anyway is important, because a deep connection with water is so elemental. And we see that from our youngest students to our oldest students. And watering a plant is an opportunity for students to really feel like they're caring for a plant. It's just different from anything else. Watering can also be connected to lessons about, for example, the water cycle, thinking about evaporation, leaf transpiration, soil types, soil percolation. I'll point out to some resources for that later as well. The design, right from the beginning, as Rachel also mentioned, should include some storage for the watering cans, and plan for different sizes of watering cans for different ages and abilities, and enough for how many students might be out there at a time, perhaps an entire classroom. The design can also include rainwater catchment systems right from the beginning, working off nearby roofs. These can be connected via piping to the green areas. Along with rainwater cisterns, I want to point out the benefits of also having smaller, what I call educational rain cisterns. They don't save quite that much water, but they're invaluable for students to understand this process of water conservation and the benefits of it, to be able to see these disconnected pipes helps them see water actually flowing down during the rains, or mock-ups with hoses, and they can calculate surface areas and water caught in storms. These rain barrels can have different ways of accessing the water, spigots, as well as from the very top opening. You can set up pulley systems and connect to more science lessons, study with moisture meters. Another task that has to go on through the years maybe once a year, maybe less often, is spreading mulch and compost, sort of renewing this as well. And this is a great chance for teamwork, for feeling strong, and for feeling capable, for accomplishing a really big task. Just a couple of pictures here. Older students too, working with shovels is a chance for physics lessons on levers. Again, getting to be physically active in a different way than PE, using different muscles, learning about tool safety. Again, using skills that they might use later on. And they're learning about natural processes this way too, firsthand, where these materials came from and how they are helpful to their school ecosystem. This can be tied into other lessons as well. This is simple tally marks done by students, capturing how many buckets of mulch went past them. And older students can also use area, volume, and unit conversions to help figure out how much mulch will be needed. I will also later share where to find some of these resources. Deciduous trees, as well as other trees, will have a certain amount of leaf drop, and students can be involved in raking and sweeping those off the main pathways and back into the natural forest floor. And at the same time, again, they're doing a physical activity. It's a very sensory activity, working with leaves. And I've also been told by occupational therapists, it's very soothing to the nervous system. And again, they are learning that these leaves are not waste, but they are part of the natural system. And this again ties into what they would be learning in science classes on ecosystems. Again, thinking about design, you want to plan for having these tools around, and where are you keeping them? You need some storage area that is nearby and easy to get to, and potentially lockable as well, and have different sizes of tools for different student age groups at your campus. Another task that different students can participate in is weeding as needed. Students use their fine motor skills for this task. They have to develop plant recognition, so they're not pulling out the wrong plant. And these weeds can be a valuable source for teaching, for science lessons, botany classes in older grades. So think about coordinating with teachers when there is a weeding day. Managing mulch is a simple task that all age groups can do. Here I'm showing, generally it's recommended that mulch not be right next to the tree collar, that base, but there be several inches kept clear to reduce pests and diseases. And this is something all students can help keep an eye on and learn about why they're doing this. They can also monitor the trees for their health. There's a checklist in our educator resources I'll show you later. They can help research alternatives to chemical pesticides and do experiments themselves to figure out what's needed, while also learning about natural plant defenses, and perhaps nothing is needed to be done. Depends on the situation. Students grade 5 and older can also help with pruning, and they can learn to handle pruning tools when it's appropriate, and especially if they obviously have enough supervision. And I do want to mention here that we recommended leaving the lower branches whenever possible for students to actually interact with plant parts and be learning, rather than everything being pruned so high that it's no longer accessible as a wonderful teaching opportunity. Pruned parts can become loose parts for nature play. A couple of examples of students running around and really having a grand time with imaginary play. And, eventually these things have to be moved into compost, but they're wonderful. Wonderful new thing that comes along periodically. So if, there's a stewardship committee and there's communication, that's wonderful when some of this can be left behind. And talking about pruning, often deadheading is seen as something we have been taught to do, but there's a lot of rethinking about that. And even though it may look messy or brown, actually, this is really, the pollinator organizations are really saying, leave these old dead heads. They are invaluable places for pollinators and other invertebrates to overwinter. And they are also, if they form seeds, they are seeds for birds in the winter. So think about that as well. And most importantly, keep the wonder and joy alive while getting these tasks done. Here's just an example of rakes spontaneously turning into musical instruments. That being said, I would like to just real quickly show you where you can see some of the resources I was telling you about. The Schoolyard Forest System Library has many great toolkits. I'll take you to the educator resources. We've talked about this before. And if you scroll down past preparing for planting, you get to after planting. And we have a whole section on engaging students in stewardship. So the tips on stewardship tasks with students is broken down by the task: watering, weeding, mulching, raking, sweeping, pruning, and monitoring tree health. We have a bunch of tips there for people who have not perhaps done this before. Modeling where you water, which is at the base of the plant, slow, long, deep watering, how you might have to have discussions about wet shoes and feet, and plan for that as opposed to be taken aback for that. If I keep scrolling down, some resources you can look at if you're considering putting in rain barrels and cisterns. These are some helpful guides. And it keeps going on, tips with weeding, etc. I would also like to take you to the grade band lessons that we have pulled together. These are from a variety of wonderful organizations and individuals working in the outdoor education field. And we've curated a set here. And I just want to thank all of them again for sharing these freely and making them available. So different grades, for example, if I go to grade 5, just some tips, again, broken down by those same main stewardship tasks. If teachers are watering with students, for example, they may want to think about plant water transport systems, and build a tree as a classic role play activity. They may want to study leaf veins. They may want to study water runoff, follow the drop, and comparing impervious and pervious surfaces, examine topography. They may want to get into leaf transpiration. I will not belabor the point. Here's more on weeding, studying parts of a plant, or how did those weeds get there to begin with, seed dispersal. Mulching, here's some of the resources I showed you in the presentation, how to get and apply mulch, where you can do some math calculations. And let's see, what else did I share? Oh, yes, under monitoring tree health, here is the survey, which the checklist I showed you, including an easier one that is just a visual guide for younger students. And of course, it's very general. You will have to call in arborists for any hardcore issues. Okay. That's it. I hope that is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayesha. And I will pass it on to Steve. And again, thank you for all the great questions and comments in the chat. We'll try to address some of them after Steve's presentation.
All right. Hello, everybody. So Green Schoolyards, Schoolyard Forest, gardens have been big in Berkeley for a long time. And we, of course, we still have lots of blacktop playgrounds. We are a very tight urban district. We have very small schools. I saw one comment in the about an urban district having small schools. We have many schools that are 3 acres for the whole school, the entire school property. So finding a place to do this kind of work is a challenge. Our approach to doing any of this kind of work And one of the things that I love about this work more than anything is it's really, really community based, right? You can almost always find a couple teachers at each site that are interested. Not all of them. You'll have teachers that don't want anything to do with it. But you find a couple teachers, the students are always very into it. Parents, community members, all love this kind of thing. So involving the school community in the entire process, from design, thought process, all the way through to construct, easy, and obviously depending on the scope of the work. Obviously the ecological resilience, the giving shade, making it a more palatable place for kids to learn, outdoor learning. We have found that our spaces, we used to call them outdoor classrooms. We've kind of toyed with that. They're really multi-purpose rooms. From what, you'll get anything from a librarian taking kids out, a science teacher, kids hanging out in it, the after school program, a lot of the after school program kids love it, kids hanging out and reading and talking. So it's really a multi-purpose space. And then the biodiversity is obvious. One of the things I love about, so one of the things that we love about this work is the flexibility in it, right? So you can really do any size. You can do 1,000 square feet and you can do 10,000, 100,000 square feet, right? And so it doesn't have to be a huge, big project, just to create even some space, right? You can take 1,000 square feet and plant 6 trees with a little pathway going through the middle and some seating, and you've got to start, right? So this is our John Muir Elementary School. Let me move forward. So this was an existing redwood grove at this school. It had an old beaten up asphalt pathway walking around the edge of it. And so we had a couple goals here. One was asphalt doesn't belong in nature. But also we wanted to bring the children closer into the forest without them actually running through it and compatible. So we tore up the asphalt pathway, built this redwood boardwalk, and then extended a redwood deck into the space. So now teachers bring their classroom and they'll sit on this deck and they're in the middle of the forest, talking and playing. In this case, we have an open air creek, and I found that a teacher had a makeshift, actually you can see in the background, a teacher had this makeshift like large plywood like door sitting on cinder blocks, and she would bring kids out here just to be outdoors. So we created an ADA pathway and built these redwood picnic tables, planted some additional trees, gave the teacher storage. You see the storage unit, and gave them a more usable space. But here's an example. So this is our Berkeley Arts Magnet school, and it's one of our largest, just like all blacktop playgrounds. And so we did a playground improvement project, but it wasn't like full scale. But one of the things we did was we took a 2,800 square foot space and then a 2,300 square foot space, and just created a small scale. This is 800 square foot space. We planted trees around the edge, created a pathway, boulders for seating. So this is a perfect example of, it doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar project tearing up the whole playground. You know, you can do it smaller if you want. And the kids, and it draws the teachers and the kids like a magnet. They absolutely love this stuff. They would much rather be in nature amongst trees than out on the blacktop. This is our Ruth Actie Elementary School. We actually didn't do anything here. This is an old bank of redwood trees, and it kind of goes right down the middle of the playground. So it kind of cuts the playground in half. But we have seating in there. You can see one of our white pop-up tents that we did during COVID. And again, it just draws people. It gives shade. It gives a comfortable place for people to go. I'm not going to do that either. Okay. So, so we always get questions on maintenance. And I know a lot of school districts don't have a lot of staff. But another thing so part of the community of this type of work is, again, you always get at least a couple teachers that are willing to bring their students out. We've had teachers bring students out and weed and mulch. We provide all the material. You can have volunteer days on weekends where I'll pay my ground staff overtime to work with volunteers so that they don't complain that the volunteers are taking their work. And it gives the staff, my staff, one of the things that you run into with like maintenance and ground staff is they often feel very disconnected to the bigger mission because they're never around the kids, they don't interact. And so this gives them an opportunity to have that kind of interaction, and it really makes them feel good and understand the larger vision. So weeding, obviously mulching, when trees are young, they need to be cared for. So, and staff can handle, in our district, my garden staff take care of trees 20 feet and smaller, and then contractors do. If you have pathways, if it's a larger space and you have a pathway going through, then, you know, every couple of years, pathways are a very tricky thing because facilities wants it to be a hardscape pathway, asphalt or concrete, something that won't degrade and will stay ADA compliant to meet code. And so it's a current challenge we have. We always prefer decomposed granite pathways, which they will degrade over time and need to be resurfaced. When they degrade, they're not ADA compliant anymore. So that's a little bit of a challenge. And I don't know that we have a full answer for that yet. We try to push for DG as much as we can. So we spend about $40,000 a year. That's on our mature trees. That's with tree contractors. And then my staff takes care of smaller trees. Common challenges that we run into is I take you to, so we have about 2,000 trees in our inventory. I could take you to 300 trees easily that were planted poorly in all kinds of different ways, right? So one of the things that I'm really pushing for in our district now with this whole initiative of trees and shading and schoolyard forest, the whole concept to provide shade. And what happens is so often the poor planting is that a 4x4 by 4 foot square gets chopped into blacktop, which is compacted to 95%, and a tree gets planted in it, right? And it might be a large species tree, but it will never grow to maturity if you're basically planting it into a planter box. So we have to find ways to give the tree more rootable soil. Rootable soil is everything to tree growth. Limited budgets, obviously, tracking your tree inventory. There are some resources, the ISA young tree care standards. All of my gardeners are trained on that. We could definitely get better at doing it on a regular basis, but if you do it, the trees will be much healthier. So let me see. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. We actually have dedicated money for maintenance and grounds, so that is a benefit that we have. We use a tree inventory software. All right. And that is all I have, folks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ayesha, Steve, and Rachel. There are so many things happening in the chat. Really great questions. A lot of great content. Again, we hope to have an additional webinar to talk more in detail and to go into some of the more technical aspects of stewardship and maintenance. I'm going to try to address some questions. Let's see. Someone mentioned supervision. Trying to find that specific question again, but lines of sight, and if there's ways of stewarding and maintaining a space that help promote safe visual sight lines. I don't know if that's something maybe Rachel could address.
Yeah, I put a comment or a reply in the chat, and it is something that is something that a lot of districts are concerned with, and we've seen heard some challenging stories, like schools who've had these big, large, beautiful, many year old trees providing lots of shade that have been cut because it's in the way of a camera. And I think I don't know. It's obviously that could be just that one school, and I would hope though that schools can think about, like in that example, moving the camera versus taking trees or green vegetation down. And I would also say some schools have solved for this by actually pruning some lower branches, not drastically pruning them, but pruning lower branches such that you can see, and this includes trees and shrubs, so you can see legs and feet. But you may not be able to see the entire child, but you can see legs and feet, and therefore you can have a sense of where children are on the schoolyard. So I think it's another area of trying to think creatively about how can we support that need and acknowledge that interest in understanding where kids are. There are other paradigms, and I know this isn't always the case here in the US, but I know in Berlin, Germany, where they've greened all of their school grounds, they don't have sight lines. It's quite a maze of greenness, and they rely and work with their students on using students to letting adults know if something's going on, right? There's something there's something going on. The child goes and lets a recess monitor know. And so they're relying a little bit more on students being able to tell them if something is going on. And I think, and I know that can be hard. A lot of people in this country may not agree with that approach, or feel like it's a little risky, but children are really capable of actually sharing when things are going wrong. So, but yeah, pruning and moving cameras.
Great. I'm trying to find a question here that was related to like specifically the plan itself and like even the binder and who's taking care of that and long-term engagement with the plan. Someone mentioned that they haven't had a lot of success with committee-led maintenance structure unless it's led by someone with a partner organization. And I know someone from Green Schoolyards replied to that specific question about how to make that plan more robustly accepted by the community and integrated into the community. Maybe that was, I don't know if that was you, Sarah.
Okay, yeah, no, I responded to that too, but happy to.
Yeah, that would be great to share with the group, Rachel.
So I think that I think one of the things that hopefully came through in the discussion or in the slides is that there are partners in this work, and there are, whether it doesn't matter what district you're in or what school you're in, you're usually have some of the same partners. You have your district, you have your school leadership, you have families, you have teachers, etc. And it's true that like it's often hard to create a sustainable committee, if you will. But at the very least, communication, the point I think is the major point is that within those partners, communication has to happen somehow. And somebody does have to do that, whether that's, and the idea of a committee is to try to make that as shared as possible. So it doesn't fall down on one champion to do it, because that just doesn't work in the long run. And so the more you can kind of, try to get as many partners into this and share responsibility and be clear about roles and responsibility, the better. And so it is hard to create sometimes a sustained committee, but again, the main point there is just making sure communication is happening among those partners and those stakeholders. And it has to be from somebody, whether that's principal, teacher, parent, or another family or another community member, or it could be a nonprofit that is supporting your schools, if that's something that is happening in your own district. So those partners in that graphic that we shared, and it's in our new document, find somebody or some group, whether it doesn't matter which of those partners, who can help support some of this communication and stewardship or communication and coordination.
Great. There are so many good questions in the chat. So I encourage people to kind of browse through the chat a little bit. There's a lot of responses here. Everything related to ADA pathways, which is something that Steve brought up a little bit. Even trauma-informed responses to bringing students out into natural spaces. We'll try to follow up with including some of the responses in the chat with the recording of this session. Maybe a last question to finish off on is a lot of people talk about materials that are rubber or plastic based and like easier to quote unquote maintain over time, and comparing it with engineered wood fiber and ADA pathways. And I just want to note that we, at least as an organization, we want to promote natural, ecologically based, green living schoolyards. Ultimately, we believe that, as Rachel mentioned, change is inevitable, and change in natural landscapes does happen, and it does require that shift in mindset, that maintenance of those spaces is going to look quite a bit different than just asphalt, or other traditional schoolyards that we've seen. So I want to thank everyone today for your interest in this topic. Keep learning, keep sharing resources with us, keep reading and discussing with each other. Thank you, Rachel, Ayesha, Steve, for sharing your wisdom and experience, and for everyone joining us today and all the work you do in your own communities to foster living schoolyards. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.